Hello. Just wanted to say my name is Felix. I'm just going to pop this down a bit. Right. My name is Felix. I'm from Ledger. Just wanted to mention a couple of things before I fully get started. If you guys can let me know about my audio, we can try and double check that if there is anything going awry for you guys in particular. But first things I normally mention is just to make sure that you never give out your recovery phrase. It's something that we always mention that you guys want to keep safe, as well as not wanting to sign any transactions that you're not that you don't trust in particular. I know that you guys have a lot of questions. I have one of my colleagues in the chat all at the moment, just going through and trying to answer as many questions as they can. One of the first things that I wanted to go through because if you would have tuned in for the last specific onboarding, would be just how to set up the Ledger device. You're going through and managing Ledger Live in particular. I've got my version up here and how to set it up. So going through getting the recovery phrase from the device or restoring it, your existing recovery phrase from the device itself, onto the device itself, and then going from there. So I wanted to go ahead and assume that would potentially already be done. And then I wanted to see if we can go through some extra potential details. Maybe if you're already aware of some of how to do some of the things, and we can try and give you a hand from there. So first thing I might do is, let's say you've got this all set up. Last place that I remember stopping off during the onboarding process would have been just before we added an account. As you can see, I've actually already added all the accounts here in particular. Now, these accounts correspond, remember, to the recovery phrase that you've set up the device with. So that would mean that if I reset the device with another recovery phrase, or if I actually added a passphrase when I add an account, it's going to be different. What I'm going to do now, just to go through that process, so you've just gotten your device, you've set it up, and you wanted to add an account, pretend that all these accounts aren't appearing in particular. I'm just going to get my device. I've just unlocked it, and I'm just going to go add an account here. That's the basis of how we're going to, first of all, get the addresses that we want to receive assets to, or potentially send assets from once you've actually are managing assets with your Ledger device. So at this stage, let's say I wanted to manage, let's say Doge, because I know that's not one that I have added onto my list of assets yet. So I can just type Doge. And what will happen is that, it'll come up with the account. I can select that there and click continue. I actually think that I don't have the Doge app on this specific device as well. This is Ledger Nano X, and you can see that it's going to check for the dependencies as well. I'm going to make sure to allow the manager, as you can see there. Essentially what that does is it actually goes in and checks that I have the apps. While that's doing that as well, looks like it's going to install the apps as well. I just wanted to mention that if you have any other questions, my colleague is going to be there, going to try and answer them as well. I will try to skim through at the end if we have time, just to go through those questions and see any that might not be answered as well. But one thing to mention, don't give out your recovery phrase here. Don't answer the DMs about it. We'll never DM you. So if you ever have trouble that I can't help you with right now, you can just head on to support.ledger.com and we can help you out there as well. But let's get started. Let's open the device, open the application. And at this stage, basically what's going to happen is that Ledger Live is going to ask my device for the public keys and therefore the address that I should be able to generate for a Doge account in particular. Okay, so waiting for that to load up now, and you can see I've been able to see that first account there. I think what's important, if you are managing with multiple devices, you can see in the background that you can see all of the actual names of the accounts. You can rename the accounts in particular. But let's go and change that to Doge, Doge Hot, because it's my hot wallet. Next Gen Grown, I see your comment there. That's pretty harsh, by the way. I don't feel like I'm a noob, but my feelings are hurt. Let's add this account there. Boom. And that's all sorted, right? So that's how you add an account. You might want to add accounts for different networks in particular. That's normally how I would try to manage those accounts. Why would that be in particular? Is if you're sending something on the, let's say here, Ethereum network, it's going to be different from Polygon. And just because the addresses have the same 0x prefix, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to just directly send that from the 0x address from one to another, right? So it's important to know which network you're trying to send assets on in particular. No worries, Next Gen. I'm playing around too. All right, so that was just the first thing, just to add an account. So the next thing in particular would be to, let's say you wanted to receive an asset for Doge. Don't send any Doge to this address. I'm not here asking for anything in particular, but if you wanted to get some assets from someone else, yeah, you can go select the account you want to receive it on. It doesn't have to be Doge. It can be any of the accounts that I've added. And then, boom, go from there. And then once you have gone through, and you can see the address that you should be able to get. Remember that you're going to actually also have to accept the address on the device itself, approve. And then you'll actually get the screen that will say, hey, you've shared your address securely, or more specifically that you want to know that you checked the address on the device itself and you've checked the address on the screen and you make sure that they've matched. Remember, that's one of the most important things when you're managing your assets with a ledger device is that the ledger device is the secure screen. If you don't check the address on there, let's say, for example, your computer was compromised and someone were to switch the addresses in your clipboard, all right? Part of Ledger Live will check when you copy. I'm going to go to re-verify actually, just to show you. It will potentially check if the thing in your clipboard is not the same as what it should be. So there is some things there, but in particular, the reason you want to check it is because if someone produces what's called a vanity address, and you only check like the first two and the last two, for example, then it's going to be a real problem. You think you have sent it to your friend or to someone else, but when in actual fact, you've actually totally sent it to a potential scammer. Now, the computer potentially is already compromised, but the device is actually built so that you can actually use your device in the event that your computer is compromised. That's the beauty of having that second screen. So make sure you always check the device. You check the address on the device itself. All right. And make sure it matches as well in particular. All right. So let's say that we've done that. That's how you receive the assets. The sending process is really similar as well. I'm going to mention some other things about the receipt process later, but I'm just going to double check this first. In this case, I've just got Atom up, for example. You can go through any of the other assets to send. Essentially, what you would do is you go to select what you want to send. You can select the address, and you can continue, and then make sure you can select the potential transaction fees and things like that. All of these potential processes are going to be in a help center as well. So it's important to note that if you're ever having trouble, I'm just going to pop over here. You can go support.ledger.com And what'll happen is, boom, you'll be able to see a search bar right up the top where you'll be able to search up for the specific articles. And then also on the bottom right hand side here, you'll have a contact us button. So you'll be able to go through and potentially either go through live chat, or you can go through and send us an email as well. Some things to mention now that they've been brought up, you can see here we always have a lot of notifications about what potentially will happen if, let's say, there's an outage or something like that. So in this case, we have new firmware releases for the Ledger Nano S Plus and the Ledger Nano X. This is a great segue for me to go through and show how we might update that firmware as well. Now, my understanding is that it hasn't been fully rolled out yet, so I may not get the opportunity to actually show what the actual button will look like, but let's have a look. Essentially, you'll go to the My Ledger screen. See, that's on the bottom left-hand side there. Boom. And once that loads up, essentially, if you haven't connected your Ledger device in this instance of Ledger Live before, it might ask you to allow the Ledger Manager like it asked us to do before. And you would just need to accept that on the Ledger device itself. So once this loads up, hopefully, if I've been one of the lucky ones that is part of the rollout in this case, you'll be able to see a notification up the top. And it will say that my Ledger device has a firmware update. So you can go from there. Loving all the questions, guys. So keep them coming and we can try to answer them as best we can. Okay, so you can see that I don't have the option to update the firmware, so no worries. That'll come out for me probably later on in particular. But you can actually see that I've got specific applications that I need to update as well. Now, remember that the applications themselves don't hold any personal specific data, right? So in this case, if I'm going to uninstall an application, it's not going to affect my use of the asset other than me needing to reinstall it again. So let's say, for example, I just uninstall Binance Smart Chain, just an EVM chain in this case. So it's only 4 kilobytes. But if I uninstall it, I can just go back in later, install it, and it doesn't mean that anything changes in particular, right? It just means that when you go back in and reinstall an application, you just have to go in and reinstall an application to go about and manage the assets. Although there are some workarounds you might be able to use if that was the case. But, you know, if you do see something like this that says there are updates available, it's always recommended that you go about and try and update them in particular. You can see Solana, there's a big update that's come about in particular that has allowed version transactions, if I remember correctly, as a specific. So really, really good to try and do that in particular. I do see that Freddie Burry, I think you had a question. Yes, that's in relation to a previous one. Thought you might have been asking about me. But you can see here it's updating all of the applications. On the device itself, it'll say processing, and we can wait for that update in particular. So in this part, I've gone through just the quick steps for sending and receiving. So you can always check on the Help Center, like I mentioned before. If you're having trouble sending, you should be able to see that there. Receiving. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention as well, I'm going to jump out of this. That's actually totally okay. What I'm actually going to do, just to really mess with it, is now it's locked. I'm just going to disconnect it. It's totally fine, right? Remember that if something messes up on the device itself, I can actually restore it with my existing recovery phrase and reinstall the applications, and it'll be totally fine from there. VR cover, will there be an option just to update one app? The current option is only update all. My understanding would be you should be able to update that if, let me check, because I always update it all in particular. I want to just double check if I remember that there's a button there to add that. Boom, going to continue with the update. Okay. Just wait for that to finish, if that's the case. But that's totally okay. What I actually wanted to show you guys was something about address poisoning. That's the reason we always reiterate for you guys to always go through the receive process within Ledger Live. And why is that the case? If you're going through the receive process, like I mentioned, you're always going to be going and checking the address that is on the device versus what you're seeing on screen. I think it's really important, as opposed to going and checking from the transaction history. You can see there's this really in-depth article that my colleague wrote in particular about what address poisoning is. And not only are scammers able to pretend that they're sending assets to your address, so they might send a scam NFT, which might have some arbitrary code that you can, that might, give them access to all of your assets at that Ethereum address, for example. They could also send to you a zero transaction USDC or USDT amount. They pay the gas fees, but it'll look like they just sent you a zero value transaction. Why would they do that? They're hoping that you might, instead of going to your receive process, you would actually go into your transaction history. Let's see if that's finished. Nope. I'm just going to jump out and I'm going to reset this later because I really want to show you guys in particular what this would look like. And this has actually happened on, all of my personal accounts. This is my hot wallet, for example. Yes, next gen. Yeah, it's definitely a big topic because for me personally, I don't think any one of you, we want any one of you guys to lose your assets. So it's definitely something we wanted to make sure doesn't happen. So you see here, it's not really specifically address poisoning, but these are scam NFTs, in particular, these top two. My other account, if I remember correctly, had this specific zero transaction from. And the reason I mention it in particular is because some people do get confused, like, okay, is my account compromised if I see a transaction for zero value that goes from my address to another address? And the answer for that, or if, for example, they might have minted from your address, for example, or sent from your address when you didn't even buy it, you didn't even mint it, so it just appeared it seemed like it appeared in your address. So how that might work, there would be a couple of ways that you might be able to go into that in particular, but the main one for me that I always go through to is if I just go to Etherscan, or actually USDC Etherscan, and we can check the contract values, the contract in particular. So boom, boom, boom. And what it'll say in particular in the transfer from contract is that if the approval is the approval amount has to be greater or equal to the amount that you're sending. So if you think about that logically, what that would mean is that if the approval amount is zero, it would also mean that if the transaction amount is also zero, that it allows that transaction to happen. If I actually check the transfers from, boom, definitely guys, if you don't already do this, I would really recommend going through, checking contracts of weird tokens and stuff. For me, it's really interesting. I hope it's interesting for you guys as well. And I think the reason to do this most importantly is so that you understand the thing that you're interacting with, that you're potentially signing transactions with and stuff like that. If you've siloed your accounts, which means that if you have like a Degen Mint account and then you have your a really cold wallet account, it might mitigate some of the risk factors, but it's not necessarily going to be the most convenient all the time, is it? So just something to keep in mind. Did I have to be case sensitive here? Function, oh no, read as proxy. I'm an idiot. So, boom. So just so you can see exactly the line of code that's allowed it in particular. What am I doing? It is supposed to be the ERC20 function. Transfer from, no. In any case, probably don't need to be so specific about this in particular. I'm sure you guys aren't as obsessed with as I might be in approval. If I see if we can get it up. In any case, we can move on. Sorry about that detour, but in terms of how to mitigate these kinds of in terms of mitigating these kinds of specific attacks, right? Just always going through the receive process. If you see these, for me, absolutely ridiculous attacks on my address, it'll just be like to go about and hide it. All right. It's something that, we will continue to talk about because we want to hope that you guys will stop, either sending, receiving with these assets, signing these transactions in particular. So these are the things that I'm gonna rattle you guys, shake you guys, because I don't want you guys to lose their assets. So don't sign any weird transactions. If you go onto some Mint page and it might say, hey, do you want to sign a transaction? You've got blind signing on. You don't know what you're signing potentially with random smart contracts. So that's the other thing we always mention. So those are the kinds of things that I wanted to go through really quickly. So we got the sending, we got the receiving, got potentially updating the Ledger device firmware, as well as potentially never going through into your transaction history with zero and taking the zero value transaction addresses as gospel. Remember, the Ledger device itself is going to be your source of truth, so you know exactly what the address is going to be when you look at the device. If for some reason the device's address shows something different than what is shown on screen, then it's going to be the thing that you need to be, hey, something's gone awry, and you need to double check your OPSEC and your security. I think the next thing I wanted to go through in particular is if you needed to use a third-party wallet, if, for example, there's an asset that isn't managed within Ledger Live, what you can do is you can go to supported to Ledger support. If I remember correctly, it normally comes up on my Chrome. There is a search bar that you can use that you can check what coins are supported, right? The other thing that you can do is you can go through and you can potentially use a third-party wallet. So me personally, I live a lot on EVM chains, so I use MetaMask a lot. Now, the thing with MetaMask, I'm just going to log in here. I don't even know what the password is here, but it doesn't matter. I can just go about, re-add that if I wanted to. Why? What I'm going to want to hopefully show you is using the Connect Hardware Wallet feature in particular. Now, a lot of people would say, hey, I don't want to use MetaMask because it's a security risk for myself, potentially. And the thing with using the connecting hardware wallet feature, so using your Ledger device to provide, the address first of all, and then afterwards making sure to have MetaMask ask the Ledger device to sign transactions. The reason that wouldn't be necessarily insecure just on its own would be that the recovery phrase and therefore the private keys never leaves the device, right? And because of that, even if your computer is compromised, it wouldn't affect you trying to manage these assets. So you can see this is one of my accounts here on mainnet. Now, if I wanted to go and change to a different network, I can go in and add. But there's a great tool if you're going to use other EVM chains called Chainlist. I use it all the time. Let's jump in here, and you can actually go in. It connects via MetaMask automatically, and you can actually add specific networks that you want to use. So really, really common ones are right up the top. You've got Binance Smart Chain, Arbitrum, Polygon, and I actually use MetaMask, Tallyho, Rabby all the time because I like to use the other networks such as Arbitrum, Optimism. I've used AVAX for a long time back in the day as well. So these are ways that you can use these. These are ways that you can actually manage assets on these chains without importing your recovery phrase from onto a hot wallet in particular. Next thing I wanted to go through, let's actually go through and complete the process before I jump too far, right? But, you just click Connect Wallet, MetaMask will pop up, nice and easy. And then we can just follow the prompts that'll come up to add the account in particular. Should be pretty simple going from there. Boom, you can see, I've got, my random account. These are the ones that I've added. So I might go through and show you the process there. So I'm going to add Binance Smart Chain. Boom. All right. And now when you see MetaMask and I see the drop down come up, you'll be able to see the new network come up in particular. Boom. I think we will go through the process for adding the account and the actual other options with regards to third-party wallets. You can see all the RPC details. We used to have to add this in manually, which was a pain. But you approve that, you can switch networks, and it's just going to switch over to Binance Smart Chain, and you'll be able to see that up the top here. I'm just going to add in my pin here on my hot wallet. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Just going to skim through some of the questions here. Looks like most of them should have been answered. Do love your enthusiasm. Next check grown. And we've got boom. Okay, so you can see that up here. I'll go through the Connect Hardware wallet process. Most of the time, I do consider it pretty simple. But if you do have any trouble with that one in particular, you can go to Ledger, MetaMask. I think that's all we need to search. And the Academy article should just come up straight away. It's searching it up in French, which unfortunately I do not speak very well, if at all. And you can see here that the steps will come up so that you can go through and manage that in particular. So it'll have the real in-depth steps for how to go through that. And the process is pretty similar across most of the cases that you're going to use. Boom. All right, so let's go through that process now. Wait for that to load up. I do see one interesting question. I don't know if you're mentioning it to me, KO13, with regards to signing in with any ETH account and whether that's safe or not. If you mean to say that you're potentially, providing your address to a third-party service, even Ledger, then generally speaking, just providing the address is going to be safe. If you're signing any transactions, in particular, there is a potential that it might not be safe. So make sure you trust this transaction that you're signing or the website that you're using, and know that your computer isn't compromised. If you're signing any messages, it actually can also be potentially dangerous. So it's just about knowing what message you're signing in particular and what are the potential outcomes. This is, if you're not already aware, how Kevin Rose had been compromised. He hadn't cleared his address of any of his previous approvals, and also wasn't wallet siloing as well, so he didn't have multiple accounts where one DJ and one to sign for everything and one to have as a cold wallet as well. So those are kind of the things that you can do to mitigate. So it can depend on a whole number of factors, as well as what you mentioned there, as well as what DApp you're using as well, because a DApp might, for a weird reason, ask you to sign a transaction to log in. I'm not off the top of my head, I don't remember any significant or big platform that would ask to do that. Definitely a lot of platforms that might ask you to sign a message, which generally speaking, as long as the message, if you can see the message, generally should be okay. So a lot of things to consider there for that one. Now, in terms of doing the connect hardware process, you go through to Ledger, you can go connect here, and after that, you should be able to connect your hardware wallet. Now, I think I'm going to run an issue here because I am running with Firefox. If I remember correctly, Firefox doesn't support Web HID, but since I use Chrome all the time, so boom. Let's see how we go. Freddie Burry, I do see you mentioning there. I'm just going to add in nonce and disabled. Okay. We're going to have to run it with Chrome. That's totally fine. I normally run with Chrome anyway. So let's go, and I'm just going to pop Chrome up now. Let's get to my second screen. Freddie Burry, I see you have a question about Chrome in particular. Which Explorer do you recommend? I'm assuming you mean browser. Do you recommend, or Explorer? Recommend MetaMask and you Ledger at the same time. In terms of browser, yes, I use, you can see here, I use Chrome in particular. In terms of, you can use Brave as well. I know you might want to use IE potentially if you want as well, but it's not something that, no, Edge is what it's called now, but I don't know that many people that do. That would be up to you, yeah. Yeah, browser, okay. Yeah, I personally use Chrome. A lot of people have really strong opinions about what to use. But yeah, I really like Chrome. A lot of my settings are in Chrome. I've got multiple random Google, Gmail accounts that I use in particular. So that's how I kind of manage a lot of those in particular. When you use Chrome, you can obviously, it's one of the bigger, more used browsers, and there are lots of other third-party wallets that you can use. So Phantom, Kepler, you can see up there as well, that you can use that you would use to manage other potential networks that you might want to play around with as well. So personally, I like Chrome, but you can try other ones as well. It just has to support Web HID in particular. That's the reason for that, is because that's the way that the Ledger device connects to your browser. It does not use Web USB, I think is the previous connection method in particular. So we are currently using Web HID. I'll just go through that process again about using the Connect Hardware Wallet feature But essentially, you'll be able to see here that you can go through, use the connect hardware wallet feature, make sure your Ethereum application is open, and then once you do, and Ledger Live is closed as well, and which I did not do, and then you should be able to manage your assets from there. One of the other things as well is just to make sure that you, when you're doing so, that you're selecting the correct derivation path. Why? Because Ledger Live looks at a very specific derivation path, and if you do that, if it don't, it'll only appear in MetaMask and it won't appear in Ledger Live. So there can be some confusion there. It is safe because I'm just reading a question, Freddie. So you mentioned it is safe because I heard that there are many problems in Chrome using MetaMask, so anyone can hack your MetaMask. You affirm that it is secure. So I think okay, so what will happen? Let's say I want to go through a couple of the scenarios. I use it. I think it's safe. So the reason that we say that it's safe to use in general would be that, okay, let's say my whole computer is compromised, right? And I am going and trying to sign transactions with my Ledger device. Because the recovery phrase never leaves the Ledger device itself, even if MetaMask was hacked, even if my browser was hacked, and I'm seeing that, okay, I'm sending to my friend, when in actuality, Ledger, the MetaMask and the browser is actually sending me a transaction to sign to send to the scammer's address. I should see that on my device and say, hey, the address that I'm interacting with is different than the one it's saying to be. So if you see that, then you instantly know something is wrong. And because you haven't signed the transaction yet, you don't just approve it if you see it's different. Because you've seen the address is different, right? That would mean that you would know that something is wrong and you've potentially the computer at least has been compromised. So yes, anyone potentially could hack your computer or MetaMask, but because I'm not saying that there's some 0 day out there, but someone could. And in doing so, that would mean that the device itself would show you, okay, I'm sending it to a specific address. Why is that the case? I'm going to stop this. I'm going to deny the transaction, and then I'm going to try and figure out why that is the case further. Check the computer for malware, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why Freddie, would normally say that would generally be safe to use this process of Chrome and MetaMask, is because in particular, when something is going to go awry in that particular case. All right. While I'm going through that process, seeing as we are heading towards the last 10 minutes, I'm going to try and run through the couple of the questions, since my colleague does have another meeting. Let's see if I can run through this real quick. T-Kid, if you have multiple wallets on your ledger, if something bad happens to one wallet, will all wallets be affected? If your wallet, recovery phrase is compromised on the ledger device, yes, all wallets are affected. If you're signing some kind of smart contract that potentially gives approval to a scammer, normally that only affects the one address. So those are the specific things that you would need to consider there for that question. Wild Horses mentions, hi, I have 3 Ledger devices. How do I know which coins are on each device? Because Ledger app seems to show my total balance of all 3. You would want to, you wouldn't check it on the device itself, you check it on the account. So you select, I'll go back to Ledger Live. You can see how I've renamed them. You want to rename it for each specific device, and each specific account will correspond to potentially one public-private key pair for each device and each network as well. So make sure you rename them when you add the accounts. So hopefully that answers that question. 695 Bluefin mentions that your NIR won't sync. That's definitely something I would get a hold of us for. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can so we can get that sorted out. Next Gen Grown, you mentioned you did tell them about Ledger Connect coming out. Also about fixing it then. I'm assuming there was a question there above there. So You can quickly pop that in. If I get some time, I'll try to answer that as well. KO13. Oh yes, we answered that as well. And Freddie Burry's question. Now we get to Soquina. When will I be able to stake my Matic in Ledger? You actually can stake your Matic in Ledger. You would just have to stake it on the Ethereum network as opposed to Polygon, in the Polygon network in particular. Let's see. I'm just going to quickly pop that. So you jump onto the Help Center. You should be able to get that sorted in particular. Next thing, Freddie Burry is just answering that question. Awesome. Thanks, Freddie, as well. Just did an update as I said. Error still on your BTC wallet. So what is this error? Near Explorer does. So you said Near Explorer does not have the latest blockchain data. I would consider the first thing that comes to mind would be what versions of Ledger Live, Ledger device firmware, and MCU. So that's the Ledger device, sorry, and the application rather that you're using. If they're all up to date, the other things would be to make sure about the, if you're using a VPN, if you might be on a particularly restrictive network, for example, those are the kinds of things that can affect your instance of Ledger Live, essentially trying to reach out and get the blockchain data from our infrastructure and not being able to receive it. I'm getting this error because my device is locked. So just so you guys are aware. But John, if you had more information about that, you can try to pop those in the comments if you'd like. You can definitely get a hold of us, support.ledger.com. And if you've already done that, pop the case number in the comments as well. And we can try to help you out there with that. Kerberos, I actually do see your case number. I've already jotted it down, so we'll come back and get that later. So we can try to help you out with that. But you can see here, I've connected to MetaMask, and you can select the Ledger Live path because I have potentially some assets there if I want to, but you can also select Legacy or BIP44 as well. And those will change the addresses that you get. And they may not appear in Ledger Live. So BIP44, for example, may not appear, or especially the legacy might not appear as well. So make sure that you select the right address. I sometimes use these addresses as kind of ditch addresses or burner addresses if I want to as well, because I'm never going to use them within Ledger Live. I use them with the MetaMask only, and then I can just move on to the next one as well if I want to. So just some things to consider as well. There were some extra questions that I did not answer. So Kerberos, I mentioned, I have jotted that down. The one you've mentioned is Ledger having issues with Binance swaps. So you're swapping USDT to BNB using Ledger, and it's not prompting to approve transactions on Ledger. I'm on the new firmware. So first thing that I'd be checking is what firmware specifically that would be. But when you mean Binance swaps, what you mean by that in particular? Because there are you swapping, within Binance.com, so within the centralized exchange? I don't think that's the case because, of course, you wouldn't be using a ledger if that's the case. If you're using some kind of decentralized exchange, the first thing that I always think about is if you have blind signing turned on, which is a setting that you can find. Let's see, blind signing. Normally, you just scroll to the right and you should be able to find that setting. It's really similar to the Ethereum app in particular. So if you've enabled blind signing, if it's a decentralized exchange, the first thing I would think of is enabling blind signing. But if it's a centralized exchange, then it's about liaising with the exchange in particular. If the other potential option would be it's a swap function here, then we would want to know, potentially have you either liaise with the provider. So I think you've mentioned Binance in particular. I was not aware that Binance was a provider of swaps in our case, being that it's normally like Changerly, Coinify, if I remember correctly, that kind of thing. PancakeSwap. Okay. Yeah, I've not had any issues. I do swaps with decentralized exchanges all the time, and I don't have any issues in particular. If you want the one, definitely get a hold of us. I've never had issues with PancakeSwap at all. What can I think of? It might be on the incorrect network, maybe. I mean, I'm sure you should be on Binance Smart Chain if I remember correctly. If blind signing is on, yeah, I definitely just want you to get a hold of us so we can try and troubleshoot that with you further. Because yeah, I definitely do swaps pretty much on a daily basis, and haven't had any issues. So the other thing, maybe if it is a connection issue, might be worth checking with another browser, then another USB port, and then another USB cable, if possible, making sure that it is a data cable as well. So those are the things quick things that pop up to me. If you do get a hold of us at support.ledger.com though, just make sure you can even mention my name. They'll just send the case over to me, and I'll try to get that answer for you as soon as I can as well. John, you mentioned I've updated everything, firmware as well as the Ledger Live app. I've never had such an error, and also pretty much nothing changed either. Do I still have access to my assets? No matter what, you always have access to your assets if you have your recovery phrase. We would never necessarily use this as the first option, but if you desperately need your assets, you can potentially go into a hot wallet and import your recovery phrase. Now, this is why I mentioned if you desperately need it, in particular, because it might be an issue if your computer is already compromised and you put in your recovery phrase and instantly someone's like, hey, I see those assets, I'm just going to take them out straight away. So we don't normally recommend it, but if it's something you desperately need to do, you can potentially do that. Otherwise though, that's also something that I'd want to get a hold of you for, because we'd want to find out more information. We want to see if we can isolate the issue. Normally we might even try to get logs from you, John, in particular, because that is happening within Ledger Live. So if you do so, also you can mention my name. We can try and see if we can work something to help you and to try and troubleshoot with you. But normally, yes, it's normally to do with the network trying to prevent something trying to prevent Ledger Live potentially from trying to get information from our infrastructure to get that latest data. That's normally the issue. But if there is some kind of outage that we're not aware of, it's definitely something we want you to get a hold of us for. So yeah, definitely let me know. Pop my name in there if you need to, and then that way someone will send it straight off to me, and then I can just try to look at that ASAP as well. We are heading up towards the end of the time, guys. Not sure if you have any other last quick questions to pop in there as well. I always mention at the end I mention it all the time, don't give out your 24 words. Don't sign any transactions that you don't trust, and we don't want you guys to lose any of your assets. John, I don't know if the problem will go away by itself. That's why I'm hoping that you get a hold of us. You can mention my name. I would expect that if it's an issue on our end and we already know about it, that it would be resolved, like the devs would be already working on it. But I definitely want you to get a hold of us, John, so that if something happens, if it's just isolated to you and it's a very small issue, like in terms of number of people, then we want to make sure that it's fixed for you. Let us know, we can try and troubleshoot with you. Just get a hold of us. We'll try to go from there. Jim C with the trolling, but love you. Thanks for the support, mate. But yeah, don't sign any transactions you don't trust. Don't give out your recovery phrase. I know it was a bit of a late start today, but we'll be back for sure for an AMA on Thursday, as well as a Twitter AMA on the Friday as well. So yeah, get a hold of us. Thanks guys for the questions. I've jotted all of the content down as well. So we'll try to pass on all the feedback that you guys have provided. Thanks guys. Bye.